Our first lesson is from the book of Exodus, the 16th chapter, verses 2 through 4, and then 9 through 15. Familiar story. Listen now to the word of God. The whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat and ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day. In that way I will test them, whether they will follow my instructions or not." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole congregation of the Israelites, draw near to the Lord, for he has heard your complaining." And as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the Israelites, they looked toward the wilderness, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord spoke to Moses, "I have heard the complaining of the Israelites, and say to them, at the twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread, and then you shall know that I am the Lord your God." In the evening, quails came up and covered the camp. And in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. And when the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. And when the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" or manna, for they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
And hear this familiar story from the Gospel of Mark, the 6th chapter, beginning at the 30th verse. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away to a deserted place by yourselves and rest for a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and hurried on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. So Jesus went ashore. He saw the great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy them for themselves something to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said, "Well, how many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they found out, they said, 5 loaves and 2 fish. And then he ordered to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. And so they sat down in groups of hundreds and of 50s. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set them before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among all. And all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces of the fish, and those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
There's never enough, so we say. There's never enough time to do all the things that we want to do, never enough talent to solve all the problems in our community and world. There's never enough food to feed a hungry world, never enough money to satisfy our needs. From household budgets to church budgets, from government agencies to public charities, from healthcare institutions to community organizations, we say there is never enough to get what we need to get things done. And so we operate out of a mentality of scarcity rather than abundance. Dr. Douglas Hicks, the president of Davidson College, I had to put a plug in for that, has written in his book, Money Enough, that people of all economic classes say that if they had 20% more money, they would have enough. No matter what we think we have, we think we must have more to be satisfied. Hicks notes in his book that the problem with hunger in the world is not the lack of food. The world produces enough food to feed a hungry world, to give an Earth's population an adequate diet. The problem is the lack of will to share and the lack of access to infrastructure and economic resources to receive the food. Long before the days of abundant harvests and distribution systems, the children of Israel found themselves in the wilderness and without enough food. They had fled from Egypt through the terrifying waters of the Red Sea, only to encounter an even greater terror of starvation and death. As their hunger grows, some of them wish they had stayed as slaves in Egypt. At least there was food to eat. And so they murmur against Moses. Did he bring us all this way out into the wilderness only to die? What does freedom mean when your children are starving to death? Parents in Gaza, Sudan, Ukraine, perhaps are asking this same question. In the wilderness, God hears the cries of the people and sends them quail in the evening and manna in the morning. Even before God makes a covenant with the people at Mount Sinai, God feeds them bread. God meets their most basic need. The Lord knows that people cannot think about heaven when their minds are fixated on bread. I remember hearing about one church in a large city that opened a soup kitchen, and that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Every day in good weather and bad, the people lined up outdoors for food, and when the doors opened, they sat at tables in the fellowship hall. Before the guests were allowed to eat, they had to listen to a long sermon, even longer than this one. Dangling food in front of hungry people may create a captive audience, but it's not much a way to share the gospel. As far as a person is far more likely to hear the gospel on a full stomach than an empty one. The Good Samaritan didn't preach a sermon before he bound up the wounds of the man lying in a ditch. He first took care of his immediate need. Psychologist Abraham Maslow developed a theory about the hierarchy of human needs. You're familiar with it. Before a person can find spiritual or emotional fulfillment, as Maslow named it, self-actualization, that person's most basic need for food, shelter, security, and self-esteem must be first met. When God provides for our most basic needs, God does it in ways that remind us of our continual dependence upon God. In the wilderness, God provided quail and manna for each day. And anyone who tried to gather more than she needed found that she didn't have any more than the one who gathered less. And when somebody not trusting in the manna, will it be there the next day, tried to store some up, and he found the manna became rancid and full of worms. Tasty, huh? In the prayer that Jesus taught, we ask God not for a lifetime of bread, do we, but for our daily bread. Now, some scholars may debate the precise meaning of the word we translate as daily, but they all agree it means the bread that is necessary for life, the bread sufficient for the day. The prayer asks God for what we need to sustain us this day, so that we may ask God tomorrow for what we need tomorrow. This prayer invites us to put this day and our future in God's hands. When Jesus feeds the hungry crowd in the wilderness, he meets their most basic needs. The disciples want to send them away to fend for themselves, but Jesus says, no, have them sit down on the green grass. Wait a minute. Where are they? Out in the wilderness. What? Green grass? I don't think so. What's Mark telling us? There's no grass in the wilderness. He's telling us who Jesus is by giving us an echo of the most familiar psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green grass. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. Jesus, out there in the wilderness, is the good shepherd who cares for the sheep, who has compassion for the crowd, who provides for their most basic need. And when Jesus takes the bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to the crowd, we recognize in these acts more than just a picnic on the lawn. It's a sacred feast, a divine Eucharist, a holy moment. And in the life of the church, Jesus becomes the broken bread for us, given for us all. You recall in John's gospel how Jesus said, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." Jesus feeds us body and soul. He gives us our daily bread. And when we are satisfied, he wants us to see that our most basic need is what? God. We have a hunger for God, which no thing on this earth can ever satisfy. Sarah Miles was raised by her parents to be an atheist with a social conscience. She was a chef, a journalist, a social activist. In her book, Take This Bread, she tells about an experience she had when she was 46 years old. For reasons she did not even understand herself at the time, she found herself in worship at St. Gregory's Episcopal Church in San Francisco. And when she heard the words, "Jesus invites everyone to this table," she joined the others around the table. She writes that when she ate the bread and drank the wine, something outrageous and terrifying happened. Jesus happened to me. She went on, "I still can't explain my first communion. It makes no sense. I was in tears and physically unbalanced. I felt as if I'd stepped off a curb or been knocked over painlessly from behind. The disconnect between what I thought was happening, I was eating a piece of bread, and what I knew was happening, God named Jesus, was real and in my mouth. It utterly short-circuited my ability to do anything but cry. And for some inexplicable reason, I wanted that bread again." And from the taste of that bread, a food pantry she began in the church that served 250 folks a day. The pantry was located not in some far out of the way place in the church, but right there around the communion table in the sanctuary. And people came into that sacred space to select the food they needed to sustain life. And there she talked with them, she prayed with them, she cared for their needs. "I wanted them to see Jesus," she said, "who is the bread of life. He's the heavenly bread that feeds our souls, our bodies, our lives. He is the bread that makes us whole." What does the gospel teach us? The gospel teaches us that there is more than enough for all. It's about sharing what we have and trusting that God will provide. It's about moving from a mentality of scarcity to a mentality of abundance. The disciples that day were operating out of a mentality of scarcity, wanting to send the crowds away, but Jesus was operating out of a mentality of abundance with enough left to feed all the tribes of Israel. Every time we take this bread, we give thanks, we break it, and give it to the gathered people. We remember and experience anew God's abundance. When we provide for the basic needs of life like bread and shelter, justice and peace, we open the door to helping others. We help others find their deepest need. And what is their deepest need? To live in perfect communion with God and with one another. Well, you may ask, what does this have to do with bread for all? The Church of Christ has labored too long with a spirit of timidity and scarcity. And all the while, Jesus is calling us to fearless generosity and faithful trust in God's provision for our needs. Thinking there is never enough, we will live diminished lives. I'm not just talking about material goods, but good feelings, the good use of resources, the good use of time, hoarding our bread in material and spiritual forms, being parsimonious distributors of our time and resources, casting a suspicious eye on our neighbors lead us to deprive others of the basic bread they need to live and live an abundant life. Jesus is the bread of life, the good shepherd of us all, who breaks and shares a few loaves of bread so they become a feast for thousands. God's abundance means that we can open our eyes to the possibilities of abundant life, not just for ourselves, but for our neighbors. There are undocumented immigrants, homeless families, incarcerated individuals in our land who need the bread of life just as much as all of us who gather around this table today. And when we provide for the most basic needs of life for others, food and shelter and justice and opportunities to work and learn and grow, we open the door for our neighbors to come to know Jesus, the bread of heaven. What we give away of ourselves enlarges our capacity to feel compassion, to open our minds to God's way, and awakens our heart to Christ's presence here today, and makes us richer. In truth, there's more than enough for all. Amen.